the best wide receiver from every NFL draft since 2010. 2010, Antonio Brown. So, the 2010 NFL draft had two first-round wide receivers, Demaryius Thomas and Dez Bryant, both absolute studs in their primes. If you asked anyone in 2013 who the best wide receiver from this class was, they'd probably say one of those two. But then there's Antonio Brown, a 6th-round pick who turned out to be the best of them all. AB was like that guy who got no attention in high school but shows up to the 10-year reunion driving a Lamborghini. At his peak, he was the most unguardable receiver in the league. Elite route running, insane separation, and played like he was 6'4" despite only being 5'10". From 2013 to 2018, he averaged 1,524 yards and 11 touchdowns per season, a peak stretch as high as any receiver in league history. Dez Bryant was a touchdown machine, and Thomas was an absolute menace with Peyton Manning throwing him the ball. But AB, he was on another level. He'd cook a guy off the line, spin away from a tackle, and then flip into the end zone just for the flex. He even had an 1,800-yard season in 2015, which only 6 receivers have ever done. Of course, Antonio Brown's post-Pittsburgh career went off the rails faster than a roller coaster with no brakes, but if we're just talking about on-the-field dominance, there's no question Antonio Brown is the best receiver from the 2010 NFL Draft. 2011, Julio Jones. The 2011 draft was top-heavy at wide receiver. You had AJ Green going 4th overall and Julio Jones going 6th. And from the jump, both guys were freaks of nature. In a lot of other classes, AJ Green would have a legit case for the top spot. But unfortunately for him, Julio Jones exists. Julio was built in a lab to play receiver. 6'3", 220, elite speed, jumping ability, and an absurd catch radius. He was a walking mismatch. Defenders knew exactly what was coming and still couldn't do a thing about it. From 2014 to 2019, he was a yardage machine, averaging nearly 1,600 per season. And the dumbest part? He did all of this while barely scoring touchdowns. The man was terrified of the end zone. I just remember in fantasy football everyone always being so confused as to how Julio Jones scored so few touchdowns. Meanwhile, AJ Green was right there with him, especially early on. Before injuries slowed him down, Green was putting up 1,000-yard seasons like it was nothing, making insane catches and carrying Andy Dalton to the playoffs. If it wasn't for Julio, AJ Green would probably be remembered much more than he is. But Julio was just a little better at everything and overshadowed him for the entirety of their careers. 2012, T.Y. Hilton. The 2012 class, not great. 4 receivers went in the first round, but no one in the class was a true superstar. That's how we end up with T.Y. Hilton as the best receiver of this year. Not because he was a generational talent, but because he was the last man standing. But to be fair, prime T.Y. was a dog. He wasn't the biggest guy at only 5'10", 180, but he was fast, shifty, and could torch defenses deep. He was Andrew Luck's favorite target, racking up 5 1,000-yard seasons and leading the NFL in receiving yards in 2016. But let's be real, this draft had one major disappointment. Justin Blackmon. He went 5th overall after one of the greatest college careers of all time. The guy had the talent to be an all-time great. In 2013, he averaged 104 yards receiving over 4 games, including a 20-target, 14-catch, 190-yard performance. But his love for alcohol was stronger than his love for football, and he only played 2 more games in his career after that. Alshon Jeffrey was also pretty filthy for a few years in Chicago, but he had a very short prime. So by process of elimination, T.Y. Hilton takes the crown for 2012. He was reliable, productive, and stayed relevant for nearly a decade. Not exactly the sexiest pick, but he outlasted the rest of his class, and that counts for something. 2013, DeAndre Hopkins. The 2013 NFL Draft is notorious for most of the top receiver prospects being busts, like Tavon Austin, Justin Hunter, and Cordarrelle Patterson, who wasn't really a bust but didn't make it as a conventional wide receiver. But luckily, a couple guys carried the entire class on their back, especially like Tom Savage, Brian Hoyer, and Brock Osweiler. Then, when the Texans finally gave him a real quarterback, Deshaun Watson, opted to trade him for a washed-up David Johnson. Keenan Allen has also had a fantastic career and is the best route runner from this class. Hopkins is still the pick, but it's closer than most people would think, in my opinion. 2014, Davante Adams. Unlike 2013, the 2014 class was absolutely loaded. One of the best wide receiver classes of all time. Picking just one guy is kind of a nightmare. But the 3 main contenders? Mike Evans, 1,000 yards every year since entering the NFL. Odell Beckham, one of the most electric players ever at his peak. And Davante Adams, elite route running, elite hands, elite peak, and longevity to go with it. So let's break this down. When OBJ burst onto the scene, it felt like he was about to become the next Jerry Rice. That one-handed catch versus the Cowboys turned him into a superstar overnight. And from 2014 to 2016, he was unstoppable. 3 straight 1,300-yard seasons, highlight after highlight, and an unreal ability to torch defenses at will. But after that, injuries, team drama, and the fall-off. He never returned to that level. Meanwhile, Mike Evans is an Iron Man. 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons and counting. He's been a touchdown machine with multiple quarterbacks, from Mike Glennon to Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield. But he's never quite dominated the way OBJ or Davante Adams has. Adams didn't pop immediately. He was just a decent receiver for his first couple of years. But once Aaron Rodgers unlocked his potential, he became a touchdown machine. 6-time Pro Bowler, 3 straight first-team All-Pros, 1,300 yards in 4 out of 5 seasons, the best red zone weapon of his era, and route running so precise it made Chad Johnson cry real tears. Even after leaving Green Bay, he put up 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns with the Raiders. His game isn't just built on speed or size, it's built on pure skill. Odell shined the brightest, Evans had the longest sustained success, but Adams is the most complete. Elite at literally everything and is still going strong. That's why he's the best wide receiver from the 2014 draft. 2015, Stephon Diggs. If you want to talk about steals, look no further than Diggs. The dude was practically ignored in the draft. He went in the 5th round out of Maryland after countless wide receivers, including names like Kevin White and Dorial Green-Beckham. Now, to be fair, Amari Cooper was the most hyped receiver from this class. He was the 4th overall pick and started strong. 4 Pro Bowls, multiple 1,000-yard seasons, but I think of Amari Cooper as a slightly lesser version of Mike Evans. He's always been good, but never great. One week, he'd drop 200 yards, and the next week, he'd vanish. Stephon Diggs, on the other hand, got better every single year. As a Vikings fan, I think midway through his rookie year, most people felt like it was not a matter of if, but when Diggs would become a superstar. He and prime Adam Thielen took over games on a weekly basis in the late 2010s. Along with that, he was as clutch as anyone. His signature moment? Obviously the Minneapolis Miracle. The last play somehow catches a pass, keeps his balance, and sends the Saints home crying. He was great in Minnesota, but teaming up with Josh Allen took his numbers to another level. Once he got to Buffalo, he immediately led the league in receiving yards, and his chemistry with Josh Allen turned the Bills into a Super Bowl contender. Even in 2024 with the Texans, he was balling until he tore his ACL. Seems like he's spending a lot of time with Cardi B these days, so I'm a little bit concerned for him, but we'll see how he bounces back in 2025. 2016, Tyreek Hill. If you were building the perfect wide receiver, you'd probably start with Megatron's size, Randy Moss's hands, and Jerry Rice's route running. But Tyreek Hill just decided to be the fastest human on the planet instead. And that's how we ended up with a 5th-round pick becoming arguably the best receiver of the past 10 years. The actual first-round wide receivers were an absolute dumpster fire in 2016. Corey Coleman went 15th and was out of the league in the blink of an eye. Will Fuller was pretty good, but his hamstrings were made of papier-mâché. Josh Dotson, just bad. And Laquan Treadwell ran like he had ankle weights on. So yeah, every first-round wide receiver in 2016 was a waste. Meanwhile, in the 5th round, Kansas City took a chance on some small, speedy return guy from West Alabama. And that's how Cheetah ended up being not just the best receiver in this draft, but the best player of the class at any position. Hill started his career as mostly just a gadget player. Jet sweeps, kick returns, the occasional deep shot. But then they realized, wait, can he just play receiver? Blazing speed, check. Underrated route running, check. Can turn a 5-yard slant into a 60-yard touchdown, check. Once Patrick Mahomes took over, Hill became the most terrifying deep threat in football. Defenses literally played 15 yards off the line just to avoid getting torched, and they still got burnt deep. 8 Pro Bowls, 5 first-team All-Pros, helped Mahomes win an MVP and a Super Bowl, and has over 11,000 career yards at only 30 years old. In 2022, he left Kansas City and got even better. He put up career highs with Miami as the heart of their track meet offense. Meanwhile, the other top wide receiver from this class, Michael Thomas, looked like a superstar early on, broke the single-season reception record, and won Offensive Player of the Year in 2019. But after that, Drew Brees retired and injuries wrecked his career. So the best receiver from this class is Tyreek Hill, and it's not even remotely close. 2017 Cooper Kupp. The 2017 draft was supposed to be loaded with receivers. Scouts hyped up names like Corey Davis, Mike Williams, and John Ross, who all went in the top 10 picks. Meanwhile, Cooper Kupp, a third rounder out of Eastern Washington. The man wasn't just overlooked, he was playing on a field literally colored red. While NFL scouts were understandably drooling over guys who dominated at big schools, Kupp was out there cooking future insurance salesmen in the Big Sky Conference. And Kupp started his career as a nice, reliable slot receiver, but in 2021, he broke the damn league. 145 catches, 1,947 yards, and 16 touchdowns, leading the NFL in all three categories. Then he tacked on a Super Bowl MVP with 8 catches, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns, arguably the best start-to-finish wide receiver season of all time. But even before 2021, Kupp was one of the best route runners in football. But the arrival of Matthew Stafford brought him to another level. He's not the fastest, not the biggest, or the flashiest, but he just gets open, makes plays, and wins. Chris Godwin also deserves an honorable mention, but the 2021 season makes Kupp the clear pick. 2018 DJ Moore. 2018 was the draft of the quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. But let's be real, the wide receiver class, pretty forgettable. There were no surefire superstars coming out, and while some guys have been productive, nobody has completely taken over the league. That's why the best wide receiver from this class isn't a Hall of Fame lock or a perennial All-Pro, it's DJ Moore, the most consistent wide receiver of the group. The first 3 receivers taken in 2018 were DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, who looked great in Atlanta but then missed time due to a gambling suspension, and Courtland Sutton, who's a good contested catch guy, but he's not a true number 1. Meanwhile, DJ Moore has spent his entire career stuck with bad quarterbacks. Cam Newton on his last legs, Kyle Allen, Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold when he was terrible, and then Justin Fields before finally getting Caleb Williams. And despite all of that, Moore has still put up numbers. 4 1,000-yard seasons, and some of the best yak ability in the league. Calvin Ridley might have been the best route runner of this class and had the highest peak back in 2020, but he lost an entire year to suspension and hasn't been the same since returning. DJ Moore's not super flashy, but he's been the most consistent, durable, and productive receiver from this draft. Put him with an elite quarterback and he'd be talked about totally differently. 2019 A.J. Brown. Now, the 2019 draft had some serious talent at wide receiver. You had DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, and some other solid names. But when you look at who's had the biggest impact, who's been the most dominant, and who scares defenses the most, A.J. Brown is the only answer. This class gave us big-time playmakers, but A.J. Brown stands out because he's a rare combination of size, speed, and physicality. He's like the modern-day version of Terrell Owens. In his first 3 seasons, he put up 1,000 yards twice, despite being in a run-heavy offense. He led the Titans in receiving year after year and helped make Ryan Tannehill look good. Then he got traded to Philly in 2022 and immediately put up a career-best 1,496 yards and 11 touchdowns. Then in 2023, he broke an NFL record, becoming the first wide receiver to ever have 125 yards in 6 straight games. Dude was completely unstoppable. A.J. Brown plays like a tight end who runs a 4-4. You try to press him, and he'll throw you into the stands. Give him space, he'll catch a slant and take it 60 yards. He's one of the best contested catch receivers in the game, but also a monster after the catch. There's no real weakness in his game. Deebo isn't a true conventional wide receiver. DK might have more straight line speed, but if you needed one wide receiver from this class to build your team around, it's A.J. Brown every single time. He's on the same level as Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. His numbers just aren't the same because the Eagles were the most run-heavy team in the NFL. They just went 16-1 in games he played while winning the Super Bowl. 2 of their 3 losses in 2024 came while he was out with a hamstring injury. If he ever finds himself in a prolific passing offense before he exits his prime, the numbers will be absurd. 2020 Justin Jefferson. This was another stacked receiver class. CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk. But let's be real, one guy made this a one-man race, and that guy is Justin Jefferson. As great as CeeDee Lamb is, this isn't a debate. Jefferson is on a top 5 receiver of all-time trajectory, and plenty think he's the best to ever do it. But he wasn't the first receiver taken. That honor went to Henry Ruggs. After that, Jerry Jeudy, then CeeDee Lamb, and then Jalen Reagor, which still gives Eagles fans nightmares. So at pick 22, the Vikings stole Justin Jefferson, and the rest is history. Almost instantly, he got to work breaking records. 1,400 yards as a rookie, breaking Randy Moss's Vikings rookie record, 1,600 yards in year 2, and 1,800 yards in year 3. But what makes him so special? His route running is unreal. He makes DBs look like they forgot how to play football. His hands are elite. He's sneaky fast, but his quickness and ability to separate is what makes him unstoppable. And he's also clutch. Ask the Bills what happened in 2022 when he made one of the greatest catches of all time. If he stays healthy, he's going to break records and be the best receiver of the generation. Although, Ja'Marr Chase could have something to say about that. In 2021, everyone was obsessed with Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance. But by the end of the season, the biggest rookie superstar was a wide receiver. A lot of people hated the Bengals pick at number 5. They had Joe Burrow coming off a torn ACL and desperately needed O-line help. Penei Sewell was the best tackle in the draft and was sitting there at number 5. Instead, the Bengals decided to reunite Burrow with his college teammate, and people questioned it. I'm old enough to remember people thinking that the guy who won the Biletnikoff Award at 19 years old was going to be a bust because he dropped a few balls in training camp. Then he stepped on the field in week 1 as a rookie and asserted himself as a top 5 receiver in the league. Straight up domination from day 1. In week 7, Chase torched the Ravens for 201 yards. In week 17, he dropped 266 and 3 touchdowns on the Chiefs. When his rookie year was all said and done, he had 1,455 yards, 13 touchdowns, and helped take the Bengals to the Super Bowl. I think they made the right pick. This class had some great receivers like Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith, but Ja'Marr Chase was an instant superstar. He changed the Bengals franchise overnight and helped Joe Burrow become an elite QB. The debate is not whether Ja'Marr Chase is the best receiver of his class, it's whether he's as good as Justin Jefferson. 2022 Garrett Wilson. The 2022 draft was supposed to be a big one for receivers. 6 of them went in the top 18, but after 2 seasons, Garrett Wilson stands above the rest. Chris Olave and Drake London have both been really good too, but Garrett Wilson is a notch above them. And let's be honest, Garrett Wilson had no business winning Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2022. Not because he wasn't deserving, but because his quarterbacks were playing like they had money on the other team. He put up 1,100 yards and 4 touchdowns while catching passes from Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, and Mike White, who Jets fans treated like a Hall of Famer for 3 games. And yet, Wilson still outproduced everyone else in the class. In 2023, the Jets acquired Aaron Rodgers, which meant Garrett Wilson was about to go nuclear. But, as we all know, he tore his Achilles immediately, so it was Zach Wilson once again. And in 2024, he got a washed-up version of Rodgers and had to compete for targets with Davante Adams. And somehow, he put up 1,000 yards again. If he had a great quarterback, he'd be putting up all-pro numbers already. 2023 Puka Nacua. Puka's on a mission to take Tyreek Hill's crown for wide receiver steal of the century. The receivers that went first round in 2023 were Jackson Smith-Njigba, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison. Now, 3 out of 4 of those guys are great, but they're not Puka Nacua. Meanwhile, Puka went in the 5th round, and most people didn't even notice. Fast forward a few months, and he was breaking every rookie record in sight. Right out of the gate, with Cooper Kupp injured for the start of the season, Puka lit it up. He ended up setting the rookie record for receptions with 105, receiving yards with 1,486, and he also put up 181 yards in a playoff game, which is also a rookie record. The best rookie receiver season of all time. He wasn't a highly recruited prospect, he wasn't a combine freak, so how did this happen? Well, he has elite route running, an unreal chemistry with Matt Stafford, and plays with a chip on his shoulder. He morphs into a tackle-breaking running back once he gets the ball in his hands. Like Cooper Kupp, he might not be the fastest or the flashiest receiver, but he's still unstoppable. He's now a top 5 receiver in the league, period. While JSN, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison are really good, none of them have an argument. The Rams found a superstar in the 5th round. For 2024, it's Malik Nabers versus Brian Thomas. For the first time in the entire video, I think there's a real debate. Every other year had a clear-cut best receiver, but for the 2024 class, Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas are neck and neck. Both played together at LSU, both are insanely talented, and both had monster rookie seasons. But who's better? When it comes to dominating targets and racking up catches, Malik Nabers is that guy. Elite route running, explosive after the catch, and can line up anywhere. He missed 2 games and still put up 1,200 yards on 109 catches, catching passes from Daniel Jones, Tommy DeVito, and Drew Lock. You watch him and he gives off Justin Jefferson, Ja'Marr Chase kind of vibes. Neighbors can be a top 5 receiver in the league as soon as next season. He just needs a quarterback. On the other hand, if you want a lethal deep threat, someone who can take the top off a defense, Brian Thomas is your guy. He's 6'3", 210 with 4.3 speed, a mismatched nightmare. He's like if Mike Evans and A.J. Brown had a baby and gave it nos. So who's better? Personally, I think Malik Neighbors is going to prove to be a bit more dominant. It's not like Brian Thomas had amazing quarterback play either, but the Giants had a legitimately crippling QB room. But the fact that we're even having this debate tells you everything. These two could be the next elite wide receiver duo from the same draft class. And anyone who claims to know who will have the better career is full of Hey guys, if you like baseball, help me breathe some life into my brand new channel by subscribing and watching my first video about the only 6 players to ever hit 60 home runs in a single season. Thank you.